Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Genesis Home Podcast, where we talk to professionals in business, real estate, and beyond, and cover topics that are important and empowering to today. Today, we are talking to Jason Joseph of Exp Realty in New Jersey, and he's going to talk to us about his journey from corporate to real estate, why real estate, and what advice does he have for people interested in real estate business or investing. Let's get started. So, hi everyone, this is Rita of the Genesis Home, and welcome to the Genesis Home Podcast. And this is our first episode. And the great thing about this is actually my sponsor is my pilot episode. His name is Jason Joseph, and out of New Jersey, but also out of New York a little bit. So Jason, tell us about yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Rita. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you going down on this adventure with me as the maiden voyage. So thank you. So again, my name is Jason Joseph. I'm a real estate agent in New Jersey and New York. Been here my entire life. And, after working about 25 years in corporate America, I made the transition to real estate. It's an interesting nonlinear progression in the sense that, for 25 years, I did my thing, different banks, different industries, all financial services or Wall Street. But by background, I'm a finance major. Went to college for it, graduated. And I graduated in a time when technology was just starting to boom. And with that, I became the youngest person in the industry, I guess, or at my jobs, where people were very familiar with the business side of it, but they didn't know how to use technology. And so being the youngest person on the team, the questions I always got were, hey, you're the youngest guy here, or you're new, you must know technology. How do I do this? And honestly, I really had no idea how to do any of it because I was a finance major. And technology was just booming at that time, or starting to boom. But I knew that I had to get the answer because that was my value add. And that's something I often try to do, is just leave something in a better position than where I found it. So I would oftentimes get the answer for these guys. And while they were so good at their business side, they would look to me for guidance on the technology side. And so little by little, my career morphed away from finance into technology. I've done things from the technical side for banks, mergers and acquisitions, project management, hedge funds, et cetera, transformation projects. So I've had I ended as a middle manager in corporate America. And then one day with my wife's support, it became one of those things where you had that epiphany and it's like, what are we really doing here? What are we really accomplishing? And I felt more than anything else, at least for me, I felt like I was a hamster in a wheel. I was constantly turning and trying to do the same thing over and over. A new project, new deadline, new priorities, new management, and I was constantly just churning. But I felt like there was no strategic goal in mind. I wasn't really accomplishing anything. For myself personally, that was fulfilling. And so with that said, I call it midlife crisis if you want. It was an opportunity for me to do an analysis of myself. What is it like? So I'd gone up, I'm Asian by background. And with that, there was, we joke constantly, but it's like, 3 or 4 tracks that you would go to college for. You would either become like a physician, you'd be a lawyer, a businessman, et cetera. And I took that route because that was natural to me. And I knew by default, I didn't want to go to medical school. And law school was also something that I considered, but ultimately I didn't want to pursue. And to that end, when I got, I went through college and everything else, and I kind of the careers found me. Hey, somebody reach out and be like, hey, listen, we love that engagement you did with us on this project. We have an opening on our team. Would you join? So my path was never something that I pursued proactively. It's something that always found me. And I always felt that corporate America would look at it and kind of reward me for that work. So work the 18-hour days, work the 15-hour days, and in the end, it would all pan out. And I can't say that honestly was what happened. I felt like as my kids were younger, I didn't get to see them a whole lot. I would be gone before they got up in the morning. I'd come home after they went to sleep, and my wife would stay at home with them for the first couple of years that they were with us. And so it it was interesting, right? Because it's like you feel like you're contributing to the family, you contribute to society, and you kind of want these things to take care of you in the same way, and it didn't, right? I have numerous org charts or different changes in direction or politics in general within a corporation, and it just didn't materialize. And after 15, 20 years, 20 years really, I decided that it was the industry that was for me, and it was time to look at something a little bit more proactively that I wanted to do. So I really took the opportunity to kind of look at all the different industries that are out there. I started with like the U.S. job codes, which is available on the federal sites, and it lists basically every industry and job that's out there from a job classification code perspective. And I try to decide at a high level what it is that I wanted to do. So after a series of weekends of kind of just like checking boxes, yes, no, could I even stomach that, or did I not want to be anywhere near that, or is it something that wasn't feasible because I'd have to go back to school and kind of restart? And now it's at the point where I was in my 40s where, that runway is kind of like I'm halfway through that runway, right, to retirement. So, maybe that opportunity would have been great earlier on, but it was no longer reasonable. So what I did was I landed up on finding a couple themes. Everything was consistently around real estate in some capacity. I knew I wanted to own real estate. I knew I wanted to manage it. I know I'm handy. So I if I was to work on it or at least understand the trades, that was interesting to me. I looked at things like, do I want to be a plumber or an electrician? And it appealed to me as a trade. I knew that ultimately my goal in either of those would be some kind of business owner, right? So own a plumbing company or electrical installation company. But that's an example of where I felt, to become a journeyman there, and the process is, somewhere between 5 and 10 years that, at that point I'd be almost 50 and probably not where I want to start a business. So I looked at other opportunities. The one thing that I always landed on again was real estate and construction. So for me, it was the opportunity to start doing flips, right? Because that integrate my handiness as well as my appetite to work with the trades. I got my real estate license to start selling real estate. My goal eventually was to take a property, rehab a property, and then be a listing agent on it, and then move on to the next one and find opportunity because of my real estate background for the next project. Little by little, I knew that I had to make a transition out of industries. I knew that would be difficult. So what I did was I started looking for opportunities on various job sites, and I found an administrative position that was available on a real estate team. They were a fast-growing team. They were doing decently well and were around for probably about a year or so, and they were looking for administrative help on it. And the opportunity I had there was to use some of my corporate background, right, for like processes and organization and what have you, apply to them in an administrative capacity, but then also get to learn the industry from the ground up. Being a real estate team, it was a fast forward opportunity to learn the business from the inside, right? So I got to see their deals. I got to problem solve with them. I got to grow with them because they were only a year under belt. And then with that, I was able to maintain a W-2 income, right? So I had a little bit of income coming in because by stepping away from corporate, obviously I had no more income. So it was a good balance for both. And so what I did that for probably about a week. And I laughed about it for a week because my boss at the time, who I'm still with actually, had a conversation with me. He pulled me aside and he was like, listen, I know your background. He's like, what is it you want to do? And I was like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to become a real estate agent, but I'm licensed, but I also want to start doing sales and flips and everything else. And he was like, listen, there's an opportunity on our team. He's like, we work really well together. And he's like, but if you're willing to, I want us to pair up and we're going to grow this team. We're going to grow this team from an agent perspective, a sales perspective. Our goal is to be, this large in the city, et cetera, in town, in Jersey itself. And with that, we will work together in doing so. And I was like, all right, great. So I literally did that one job I signed up for. The one thing he asked is, he was like, if we go down this path, are you committed to it? And it's interesting because I had applied to other similar positions. And the one constant thing that I always heard from those other positions were, Jason, I love you. I think, you're a great add to the team, but they were like, I'm afraid you're going to steal my business. They were like, and actually that's not really in my character set, so it was interesting to hear. But their thought was they would train me, I would basically get intellectual property from them, and then I would ultimately be a competitor, and that's something that they didn't want. And in that vein, this guy Brett was willing to take the chance on me, and he'd only known me about a week and a half at that point, and he was like, "Are you good to do this?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Great, let's do it." He's like, "Step out of that role. We'll hire somebody else for that, and let's grow this team." Fast forward now, that was 2018. 2020, I'm still with him. I've stepped into what's called an integrator role, or like a C-level role with him as his company. I was the fourth agent on the team at the time. We are now 34 agents as of this morning. We are the top team at Exp, which is our brokerage in the state of New Jersey. And we've gone from 46 million in revenue in sales to 125 in 2020 and looking to grow further.
Wow, that's really awesome. And what makes you think that contributed to, one, what was the deciding factor that said, yes, I'll take on this next phase into real estate, from more of administrative to getting, let's say, the deep end of the pool, so to speak?
A lot of it was timing and having a skill set. So I've worked on some pretty big initiatives. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough, in a corporate perspective, to have been exposed to so much. So I've always really thought of myself or looked at myself as like a utility player, like a jack of all, trades. It was like, hey, you have a need, let's see a need, let's figure out, solution it. And this was an opportunity to look at both strategy and the tactical to implement that strategy. So that's naturally where I feel comfortable in, jobs, right? It's kind of like that high level, what do we want to accomplish? And then kind of creating that roadmap to get there. Because this is a brand new business, it was enterprising. I think a lot of what I do has been based on analysis paralysis, where it's like you're almost afraid to make those decisions. Having the experience organically in the field was like a perfect blend, a perfect marriage, a work relationship where we were able to balance each other out. And I think we both saw that early on, and we took advantage of it.
So so this is going to be an odd question, but how did 2020 treat you? Like, how did you feel like you navigated through 2020? Because, a lot happened all at once. I mean, you had New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, which is, if anyone doesn't know, is called the tri-state area, basically just shut down very quickly. So how were you able to still conduct business while everything was, I wouldn't say frozen, but was like...
Sure. It was definitely drying up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in March, it became, like a pretty quick balance, where you had to figure out how to balance, the safety of your family, the safety of yourself, the safety of your clients, prospective clients, right? Like if you're going into a house. So, and then for us, it was also safety of our agents, right? So we had a team that we had to keep safe. And we also had, offices that we had to maintain. So for us, it was kind of come together as a leadership team and figuring out what we wanted to do, what was our thresholds for everything. So effectively our office became a ghost town, right? Like no one went there by design, just to keep everybody safe, and that was fine. We transitioned to a work from home model. The industry itself had really, in Jersey, at least northern Jersey where I am, they had shut down for about a week, that no one was really doing anything. I think everybody was kind of taking this wait and watch attitude. There's a lot not known about the COVID-19 at that point, and they were trying to figure out as an industry and a nation as to what what the rules were. So real estate agents were deemed non-essential at that point. So all business effectively had to stop. But fast forward after that week, I think the real estate agents were deemed to be almost like a hybrid essential, right? Obviously, you had the frontline workers who were doing an amazing job all throughout, and really contributed so much. But then if you look at it like that second or third tier, included real estate agents, because people would naturally either have to find a place to live, or they would be certainly impact the economy from that perspective. So real estate agents were recognized as being essential. Again, not frontline workers at all, but on that path, right, to making sure that the economy was able to keep moving. And to that end, we employ technology as best as possible to, um, you know, make that transition to this new world a little bit easier, right? So we would do virtual work tours, so I would go into a property by myself, right? Gloves, mask, um, and I would walk the person through using some kind of, video technology. Or, we would even have the people that maybe if there's a current occupant, and that would be in a vacant home, but in an occupied home, we might ask the current tenant to go ahead and film it and send it to us, or they might do like a walkthrough where myself, my client, as well as the tenant would walk through, and if we had any questions, we'd ask them real time or interactively, and we'd step through the property that way. It forced us to like think about the way things have been done and figure out how we could keep getting momentum without getting sidetracked and while still being safe. So it's definitely an interesting time. Our business, as I had mentioned, we did about 80 million in volume in 2019 as a growing team, and then we did 125 million the following year, and this is through a COVID year. So I think real estate is something that people will always need, good, bad, the ugly, right? Because either you're always going to have somebody that's buying, somebody that's selling. Um, and I liken Hoboken, which is my primary city, as the sixth borough of New York City. So usually we see a lot of folks that will go from New York City and then they move to either Hoboken or Jersey City, which is one of the adjoining cities. And then in a couple of years later, what they do is they typically transition when it's time for kids or schools or et cetera. They transition to the suburbs of that area, anywhere in like a given hour radius. So lucky for us, so we had a lot of folks that typically come from New York City and look at Hoboken, Jersey City. We have that book of business. We've got a strong established team where we've got a great reputation for that. But what we were finding in the COVID situation is that people were sometimes bypassing us. People that we hadn't worked with before were bypassing us and going straight to the suburbs. And so what we did was try to make more of a concerted effort to make sure that our clients, as well as clients we hadn't met yet, were familiar with where we were working, right? So, 34 agents on a team, we cover anywhere from Ocean County straight up to Bergen County and everywhere in between. As Rita, you kindly mentioned, I'm also a New York City agent, right? So I cover Westchester and Rockland counties because that's right next to where I live, and everything in between. So we were forced to kind of take a look at what our map was of coverage areas and then figure out how we can make people aware that they'd receive that great service level and we keep them safe. But at the same time, we would be able to service them no matter where they were looking in the state. Protocols we had in place were, there's a COVID form that had to be signed. We would check people's temperatures if the case needed to be. Gloves, masks, Purell, we made available to all the agents. So that way they can use it with their clients as they walked around and make sure that everybody was safe. We limited the amount of people that would be able to go into a showing at one time. We hosted virtual open houses. I'm just kind of henpecking, but that was some of the protocols that we had in place to keep everybody safe, or as safe as possible, as the nation really kind of, and the world really just try to understand this disease and how to address it.
So you mentioned something that you had to take a different approach. Did it also the approach also change when you were advising clients or other agents? Because I think we discussed it before how, there were certain things we just couldn't do anymore, at least here in New York, where, we used to have like open houses, and those open houses would be like expansive. Like you had like people that were there for quite a while, but then, you had more of a controlled system, as you mentioned. But did you feel like you had a change in how you advised your agents and your clients during this time period?
Absolutely. I think it's important to realize in real estate that everybody's got a perspective, right? And you have to really match everybody's or address everybody's concerns. So for us, clients may have a certain threshold in which they felt comfortable with showings in their house, for instance. And clients that we bring into our property might have different thresholds. So, and then we might have a third one, right? So it was kind of making sure that everybody understood what protocols were in place. So to that end, we did open houses virtually, right? We would walk people through properties. We would host virtual open houses as well. All those gave us an opportunity to have conversations and make sure that we understood what everybody's comfort levels were. Whether it be, two people in the house at a certain time, and that just meant that other people that wanted to line up to see the property had to wait 6 feet apart outside, and then we would cycle them through, or did we have to stay really stringent with timeframes that only one setup, agent and their clients could be in the house at a given time, or the homeowner could not be in the property at all. Again, because we want to make sure that we paid attention to this and we limited exposure to each other in contact.
What do you feel like you yourself as an agent, or you as the team, will keep going forward? I know that's a weird thing to say, but 2020 was a big experimental year in real estate. Like, there was things we tried out, there was things that didn't work. What do you feel like you would take with you in this new, I would say new normal, but in this new normal that we're facing going forward? Like, what did you feel like really stood out that would be a good routine?
Yeah, and so I think, to me, it would be that just because things were done a certain way doesn't mean that that's always the best way, or it doesn't mean that it'll be the default way, because situations change. So I'll give an example. I don't think we would ever have hosted a virtual open house prior to the need to have one, right? It was a way to kind of be creative and get more traction and make sure that the needs of people to have housing was addressed. Obviously, it helped our business as well. And I think that normally, again, we wouldn't have thought of doing that. And so with this, it's like, hey, one, keep an open mind to certain things, but two, proactively, even if it's not in the face of a pandemic, how can you creatively position your business to get some kind of, not, I won't say advantage, but to show people that that you are creative and that you're willing to take into account certain factors and address them, right? So maybe you have somebody that does it, like in an outside of COVID situation, maybe there's somebody that has an elderly parent that's living with them and could be like, it's not best that they're exposed to certain elements, right? Bringing other people in, germs, etc. Like, okay, great, let's do a virtual tour. Like, now we're more akin to figuring out solutions that'll work, whatever scenario we've got. It just makes it a lot easier. I think that's definitely one thing that we learned along the way was, hey, listen, we could break all the traditional norms as to how things are done, and let's just figure out the best solution for us, our clients, etc.
So you have a rather calming approach to real estate, at least from my perspective.
Thank you.
That, you're not very aggressive, which is a comfort considering the time period we're in. We already have so much piled on that someone who's really just like intense is just a little overwhelming. So how do you approach your business? Are you more an advisor, or are you more relationship based? Are you more, transactional? Because, each agent has a different thing. I think everyone assumes that all agents think alike. We most certainly do not. So I would be interested in seeing how you would approach your business when it comes to, getting that listing or talking to that client.
Sure. I definitely try to come from, and I appreciate you saying that. I do come from a consultative background. So in my mind, I recognize that there's multiple ways to get the job done, whatever the job may be. And so when it comes to real estate, my goal is to present facts and present them in a way that it's, easily digestible. But ultimately, I feel comfortable in that if I'm able to present it in such a way, people will make the decision that's best for them. And that's all I really want, right? So for me, just taking a step back to what we talked about earlier, when I met Brett and I kind of gone through through that path to becoming an agent and as well as a team lead, he had given me a lot of leeway to get things done. And with that, I was able to add value in a way where it wasn't, like you said, Rita, cramming, efforts and suggestions down your house, like, you want this house. I'm really more concerned about the experience of, I will tell you when I think something's a problem from a house perspective, because I want you to be aware of it. If you still suggest that you want that house, I'm going to help you take it down. Like, I'm here and I'm on your side. And my goal is to make sure that you get the house that you want, and being fully aware of what's out there, right? So I have a lot of experience from houses from ground up construction, rehabs, flips, etc., both on the finance part as well as actually swinging the hammer on it. So there may be things just in my natural experience that I see that other people would not see. Um, and I just want you to be aware of it. And if you decide that that's the house for you again, happy to help you take it down. But if that's not the house for you, and I saved you from being miserable about the experience later on as you lived in the house, so be it. So I'm more than anything else, I think, patient about it, making sure that it's the right house for you as a client. And if it's not, I'm not going to push you otherwise. And so it's funny when I first started being an agent, there's limitations from a license perspective in terms of what we can say. And I tried to make sure that while staying compliant with that, I would let my perspective be known, just give my background and handiness, where, with clients, maybe new first time home buyers, where they're not necessarily, again, privy to what, that black stuff on the wall is. Maybe it's mold, maybe it's not. It's definitely something I can call out because I'm not an expert on it. But I can phrase my concerns in a certain way that preserve both my integrity as a real estate agent, but also as a consultant to them, which is, for instance, hey, I'm not sure what that marking is. That's, that sometimes is, consistent with markings due to like water penetration. We'd have to get an expert in to think about that, to like do an analysis and tell us what that is, right? At the end of the day, definitely with integrity, I'm letting you know that there may be a concern, and we'll call in the subject matter experts. I think part of it, the entire experience with me as an agent, is to make sure that I have people that I partner with that I trust and value as subject matter experts in their field, that they'll be able to give credibility to, whatever it is, right? So, hey, it could be an inspector that says that is mold. Okay, is mold the end of the world? Is that something that automatically should walk away from? Or maybe there is an opportunity there. So as a client, just being aware that, maybe that, just follow my example, maybe it is mold and maybe there's a way to treat it. Do I still want that house? And if I want that house, is it at the same price as before we knew that was mold? Or is that something we can negotiate because that needs some extra care, concern, and money? So it's kind of having those conversations, being honest with people. That is the approach I try to take with people. I often say a phrase that my wife and family laugh at me about it, and it is what it is, right? We are presented with certain things throughout our journey throughout life. Some we can control, some we can't control. What we can control is how we navigate around those things. And this is an example, right? I'm looking to be a consultant, a confidant. I want you to look at me as a subject matter expert when you're my real estate client, or if you're an agent that's working with me, to know that I have integrity and that the people I surround myself have integrity. So if it's a lender, a home inspector, attorneys, obviously you're more than welcome to use your own if you have it. But if you don't, I want you to know that, or at least trust in the process, that I'm going to do everything I can to get you the house. That makes sense.
Well, I want to flip the script a little bit. You mentioned a lot about flipping and selling and things like that. I am aware, and I think you are too, that there are people out there that are interested in getting into real estate, but mostly in investment, flipping, buy and holds. And anyone doesn't know what a buy and hold is just buying and renting it out, or just holding it until the market in that area probably works for them. What would be your advice for people who are interested in that arena of real estate?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is just surrounding yourself with the right crew. By right crew, I mean, real estate agent, lenders, banks, attorneys. Some of those will come later on in the process. But I would join your local REIA, which, New Jersey, like your real estate investment, association, like your local branch of that. Start reading up on it. You could look at podcasts. You can start doing research. Definitely connect with a real estate agent. A couple things like an investment agent. So real estate agents can do several different things. They can work on commercial deals. They can work on residential deals. They can do a hybrid of both. They can do industrial deals. More often than not, these are residential agents that you see, or at the different big box brokerage houses. But figure out where you want to be, what you want to do. Is it, like commercial space? Is it, multifamily? Is it single family? Is it condos and co-ops? It could be any of those things. And what I tried to do when I was starting in the business was figure out where I want, with the different income sources that I wanted. I wanted, and I certainly recommend having not just one, right? So don't just focus on residentials. Don't focus on buy and holds. Don't focus on flips. Focus on all of them and in different degrees. Obviously, where you also invest is a different opportunity as well. You can invest locally to where you are. Typically, if I look at real estate in the Northeast, it's a little bit more expensive than if you go to the South, right? So thinking about budget, thinking about, what kind of properties you're looking for, et cetera, have an idea in mind, because the more specific you are when you engage a real estate agent, the better they can help you. But as a real estate agent, when I work with a client, I'll try to understand what their current portfolio is and what their long-term goals are, right? So I almost interview them to the sense of, are you looking for mailbox money? That's like a rental where every month you get the rent in the mail, right? Or theoretically, in
Yeah.
older days, right? It might be electronic transfer now. But, so you want every month you get the money and you're great. Or do you want which typically is like a smaller amount, whereas if you do a flip, you don't see money for a while, and then you do the flip when you sell it, you typically get a larger amount than you would for a rental. I say that have these different pillars all constructed in your mind in terms of strategy, because there's going to be multiple opportunities, and you want to make sure that you understand which way you're going first. As part of my interview, I'll also try to understand what their experience is with real estate. So, for instance, Frank Dipple does a great workshop or seminar. It's called 3, 2, 1 and Done. He's a lender in New Jersey, and he basically teaches you how to strategically buy property in a specific fashion and time frame that allows you to buy more property, or as much more property than you would be able to otherwise. And for example, you can use an FHA and buy with little money down. You can buy a multifamily property, and you would live in it for the first year, maybe doing some rehab. And then after a certain amount of time, you'd go and buy a second property and a third property. And it's key the order in which you do it. And Frank does a great job of talking to it. But it again has a strategy to it, where one of the takeaways from him is that within 10 years, you'd be able to own $1 million worth of property, right? So it has a strategy. It leans on both buying, holding, renting, like it hits many constructs. And so I would make sure that your real estate agent has a plan, can connect you with lenders like Frank, can connect you with, attorneys, maybe tax accountants. And again, come from that place of value to help people on a paid forward type basis.
You said something really interesting about, lenders and things like that. I think sometimes people assume that we have, that we just, when we do our networking, or some people call it prospecting, but when we do all that we're just focusing on just getting clients, but they don't understand the flip side of that is a lot of business to business partnerships and networking. So how do you grow your, so to speak? Do they still say Rolodex? I'm bringing it back.
Yep. I'm from that Rolodex era, so it actually worked perfectly. It was nostalgic. So definitely. I mean, I think a lot of what I do is I try to lead, with integrity, and that's a big word for me, right? Because I feel at the end of the day, I have, my wife, I have my 2 kids, who are, are watching parents and friends and family. They're kind of like coming to their own now as teenagers, and for that, I feel like they watch. So I want to make sure that I come from a place of integrity, because at the end of the day, it's impressing upon them, but also at the end of the day, I want to make sure I sleep easy at night. And I say that because as I navigate through deals, and I meet lenders or I meet attorneys, I do come from a place of integrity where I don't want you to have to worry about that extra element of me not being disingenuous, because then I'm not part of the team. That kind of undermines everything that I've tried to embody on the way here in my journey. And to that point, I feel that Rolodex, as you said, grows as people see that and recognize that. So I have lenders or attorneys I work with that I'm constantly asking my clients for feedback, because if I suggest to them, I want to know what they're doing well or not doing well from their perspective. And as I recommend these guys, it's constantly like a relationship. As I work at that relationship, I expect them to work that relationship to be the best we can and kind of continue pushing that envelope. And to that point is when I do make that recommendation, like I want you as my client to fully believe that we have you, that we will help you and we will get this job done, or we'll do the best we can that anybody could do really to get it done. And as you navigate on different deals with that, the attorneys will see that, the lenders will see that. Nothing is better to me is when an attorney reaches out to you and is like, "Hey, I want you to represent me for this house I found as an agent," or a lender does for any reason. Like those are like great feelings because they work with hundreds of agents, right? And they still pick you, and that's something that's always been nice. Um, yeah, so I definitely think that it speaks volumes about your reputation is everything in real estate. As quickly, as you can lose it so quickly, but it takes years to get. Um, so I would highly encourage, new agents, new clients, read about your real estate agent, talk to them, figure out what they're about, figure out what you want, convey it to them, work together, consider it a partnership, and extend that partnership to either your attorneys, lenders, whoever the case may be, or your real estate agents, and then make sure that you guys are a team that are, working together to get that job done
So,
properly.
and like I said, we've talked quite a few times over the couple of years I've been with EXP, and yes, that's my shameless plug. But we've always discussed why did you go into real estate, but we never mentioned why did you say yes to EXP and what keeps you in EXP and real estate. So we know what brought you to real estate, but what keeps you here?
Sure. So I actually love the first time homebuyer experience, and I love working with investors and everything in between. Um, I'm fairly outgoing, so I love meeting people, talking to people. I like hearing their story. It's like I almost feel like a poster child for the Humans of New York series, where you kind of just like dig deep into who they are, their psyche, etc. I think a lot of that will also fashion and form their requirements for real estate, right? Like where they want to be, what their goals are. So it's like story. So I like that piece of it. In terms of why EXP, it's interesting. So I first joined a different big box brokerage. That's where I started my career. That's where I met Brett. And then we found that little by little, as a team, we were doing more for that brokerage by doing their compliance stuff. We were doing their training. We were on their leadership council. We would mentor agents through them, and it was our way of giving back to the organization. What we found with EXP was that we could still do that on a different scale. I look at big box real estate companies, brokerages, and I feel that they're as good as their corporate support may be, they're really as good as the franchisees, the people that own that specific location. And it's the blood, sweat, and tears, the education, the spending, training, et cetera, that they do that will translate to how you, as an individual agent or even a client, have as an experience. With EXP, that wasn't really a factor, and I'll say why. Because EXP had a corporate background, it has a corporate entity. There's no brick and mortar stores, right? So this franchisee model really goes away. So what they're able to do is push consistency and standards from the corporate level that everybody has to uphold as an agent. So that was one that was appealing. Two, we were already doing all that stuff, so we ended up just doing it for our team. We didn't have to almost balance a franchisee in a big box model. And EXP was just very forward thinking. So we're our average age of our agents is probably around 33, 34. So we're an aggressive team. We employ technology. EXP embodied that for us a lot. So examples, when COVID happened, typically at big brokerage firms, you'd have to get your check. You'd have to go to the office, pick up your check, deposit in your bank to get paid. EXP's model was very tech savvy, where if I just simply, they would pay me electronically by me sending them a picture of my check from the commission, which I would get from the title company. So I don't ever have to go to a closing if I don't want to. And I could always circle back with my clients later on, as they settle into their place and just to say hi and thank you for, the business, but I don't actually have to go to closing. And I say that because traditionally agents will go to closing to pick up their check.
That is correct.
Here, and so my checks can get processed electronically. I get them available the next day after closing. Um, Again, we're tech savvy, so what I like about EXP is that they offer a really nice blend of both training, both locally and from a corporate perspective. So, for instance, they will have subject matter experts that will teach the one thing that really makes their business stand out. Right? They'd be great agents in multiple facets, but if there's one aspect that they're deemed a subject matter expert on, they'll go ahead and they'll teach that class. The recordings are available. You have access to producers that are top 1% in the world, 400, $500 million a year producers. Um, we're meeting with them later today, for instance, just for them to help us, learn from their business, what they do well, what they, want to work on. And so we have access to these recordings. We have access to these great individuals that are live doing, interactive workshops with us. And then you have the balance of the technology in general. So there's also recorded trainings that you can plug into. As a new agent going in, I became the primary caregiver for my kids because my wife, when I transitioned to real estate, she transitioned to a new job in New York City. So she had more of a commute and stuff like that. So we switched roles as primary caregivers. So then what I found was, every time in my traditional big box brokerage, when I wanted to attend a training, it was only given in person at 2:00. And 2:00 would not work because I'd have to go pick up my kids. What I found with EXP was because that training was they had some options that were live, some that were recorded, and you'd have access to recordings. I was able to get that training wherever I needed to and whenever I needed it to. So, for instance, on my personal level, if it meant that after dinner, after the wife and kids had gone to sleep, and I was like, hey, it's 11:00 at night, I could go ahead and start that training. That was huge for me, right? Because at the end of the day, I wasn't held up by the training, and I was still getting that training whenever it was convenient to me, and that's huge. EXP has been fantastic for me. Um, I got to meet like people like you, which is awesome, right? And kind of participate in that career. I mentor other agents as well. So it really gave me an opportunity to be in the right time, right place, to have a voice in the way things are set up at EXP. I talk to my broker on a fairly regular basis. Our team, again, is the largest in the state of New Jersey from a volume perspective and sales perspective. It's a pretty interesting time. I feel like it's an opportunity for someone who's a go-getter to lay claim to an industry that's changing things. People will say like the stock has gone from $8, I think in February of this year, to hovering around the $60 mark current, within a year. And so it's a pretty interesting change that I think that the world, or at least, stock market is really rewarding our ability to be a little creative or to employ technology, whereas some of our competition isn't. In the COVID situation, it was actually laughable, going back to the check example, where a lot of agents were not able to go to an office to get their checks. So their checks were locked up in an office that was being closed for COVID. And so they weren't getting paid as well. And I say laughable, but obviously it's disconcerting if you're that agent.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it was like, this is like EXP and being able to react so quickly to a COVID situation and make it a seamless transition is what I think the industry needed at the time. And I think we responded nicely.
I agree completely. And you're absolutely right. I think, especially when you met me, I was still a new agent. I mean, I only had my license for a year-ish.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how the things I weren't getting at my previous brokerage, and I felt like I didn't have a voice at my previous brokerage. So, and then I had Genesis at the same time. So I think you and I were having the conversation of, I can't just go from one place to another. It's not about me anymore. It's about this other entity. And you said something that got me thinking. He says, well, Genesis can come with you. That has nothing to do with this. That's your baby. Grow that. Don't do anything with it. Just grow it. I'm going, say right. What? And then I said, let me look. Absolutely. Yeah, and I said, let me look a little closer to this, because around that time there were two other firms that were looking for agents like myself, and they were trying to buy Genesis from me. And you were the first that said, you don't have to do that. That's your kid. Grow it. It's like, okay. So I looked into it, and it's like, there's something here that, is not It's more about the entrepreneur, because we have like multiple revenue streams. You have like, they have like stock options if you want to invest in stuff. You have like there's so much in like one brokerage that you kind of look at your license differently than you would before. So I
Yeah.
always am curious with people who, not just starting real estate, because real estate is not easy or not for the faint of heart, but how do you make those decisions to stay at a brokerage that's technically a cloud-based brokerage? I mean, there's no physical places outside the offices you create. You don't have the same, structure. So you have a little bit more flexibility in how you grow your business. So I always wonder why certain people, why people say yes to real estate, but also yes to their brokerage. And what do you look for as an agent when you decide, or in someone who's interested in real estate, what do they look for in a brokerage?
Yeah. So I think it's important, as I said, not all franchisee models are the same. So I look at it as a business relationship. It's almost like dating, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to get something out of it, and they have to get something out of it, that relationship. And I say that specifically from a brokerage perspective. They're going to have certain criteria. They're going to have traditional brokerages. You're going to have to do, FaceTime, where you have to do the front desk. You're going to only get leads if you do certain criteria. Training is, like I said, at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, which may or may not be ideal for you. And you're typically relegated to whatever talent is in that office in terms of finding those subject matter experts. So I do try to figure out what it is I need from an agent. As a new agent, I was interviewing around. EXP was not around when I first joined. But I try to answer those questions, which is, like, what are the expectations of me? And then how do I interview you to see, how I could benefit from it? So, it could have been like training. I was like, okay, well, tell me about your training classes. Who teaches your training? How often are they? Great. Are they recorded? No. Okay, great. So when I look at the EXP model, what I liked about it is, we just talked about the training and how inclusive it is. What I also like is that there's a sense of community. I think that if you look at the folks, at least from a New Jersey perspective, when we joined, we were the first agents or one of the first agents in the state to join. There was a lot of pushback from traditional brokerages that were like, "Oh, you joined EXP? Oh, like that's not going to last, or that's a fad, or that's it's a $7. It's a multi-level marketing scheme, because the way they do profit-based versus revenue-based, options and stock, and payouts. And so it was definitely interesting to see all the blowback from agents that were more traditional, that weren't willing to change their process, um, and how they felt so strongly and emotionally about something. Whereas I'm just a fairly new agent that's looking to, be the best agent I could be, and this was the best opportunity for me. So it was interesting to see, because I don't feel that we came from that same place where we were just trying to, help out, where people took it very personally that we're attacking the industry that they knew. And that wasn't the case at all. Um, so it's interesting. So as I meet agents trying to figure out what brokerage it is, make sure that, that they can meet your needs and that you can meet their needs. Um, figure out a game plan. Well, how does it that you want to invent yourself? How do you want to position yourself? Are you subject matter expert in a specific geographical area? And if so, what do you do to make sure you are? Are you well familiar with the schools, the businesses, the people, the commuting, et cetera, and kind of build yourself up from there, and figure out what it is you want to do. Again, we talked about being different types of agents, being like a residential agent, a commercial agent. If you're a commercial agent, things are more analytical, where it's just numbers based. Whereas if you're residential, there might be a little bit more emotion to it, where it's not just a numbers thing. It could be, you're willing to pay a premium for that forever home. So different ways to look at it, and different things that will make you either appeal as an agent or a brokerage. It's really the same thing, but it's like relationship based.
Yeah. And, if, and like I said, when we met, I was still new. Like I literally didn't have my license for that long. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about that. I honestly thought, because I'm in Manhattan, so Manhattan is a little more name brandy
Yep,
than
for sure.
most places. I mean, we do have mom and pops, we do have certain like smaller ones, but when people ask like where you're from and they see that name, they don't have to look it up because they know that name.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you came around, EXP came around, EXP was very new to New York.
Yeah, yeah,
It was only around, I think I started in July, and nothing really happened until August. So I
yeah,
started like right as they got that license, you know what I mean?
sure.
And you were right, because a lot of people had issues with it because they didn't understand how you can build a business where there's none of those tangible items. But I think someone said about small businesses that resonated with me, and it was about the time I was talking to you, that said that sometimes investing or being part of a small business and helping it grow, you are framing that culture. And I
Right.
think what attracted, and similar to you, what attracted me to EXP as well was that culture. That you see that creativity, that you see the diversity when it comes to education and how they present that. And fast forward, like I'm gonna say about another year later, and so much has changed. I feel like I've grown as not just an agent, but as a consultant, as an advisor. I've taken lots of classes, but I agree completely with the fact that a lot of it is down to your standards and what you're looking for. And your background and mine are obviously different. Mine is more small business and retail, and yours is more finance and corporate. But knowing how those tend to overlap in the sense of how we communicate is very
Hmm.
important. I think our brokerage made sure that that communication and that integrity, as you mentioned a lot, is there. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah, no, it's really important because at the end of the day, I want to make so it's funny because like in that journey since we joined, it's so different now where some people still feel strongly about it, but now the brand recognition is there. Whereas people were like, what's EXP? And it was a West Coast based model that kind of was slowly evolving here, and we picked it up in Jersey, almost directly from the West Coast. But going back to it, just the network and the internal network that we have access to is pretty tremendous. So at any given time, I can pick up the phone. I can call one of the top agents, somewhere else, San Diego, Ohio, North Carolina, wherever the case may be, and say, hey, listen, you know what? I've got a question, or I've got a family friend that's moving, a family member or friend that's moving down there, uh, and I need some help, and they will help you from a place of we've all been through this together, this journey of having some of that animosity, focused on EXP to growing the EXP brand to becoming successful with the brand. We've all largely gone through the same thing, so we're almost. I don't want to make light of it, but we're almost like soldiers in this war together, and in that sense, we are willing to help each other out and kind of be the best we can be. And so you can call people up and ask them about their business, open book. Um, well, they'll tell you what works, what doesn't work. I've demoed applications, I've talked to operations managers, similar roles as mine, where they'll.
So, any advice you might have for people who are interested in real estate as an agent or an investor, or, you know, just maybe they're transitioning into maybe another facet in their life? They want to pursue this as a career at some point, or they're a buyer. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. So kind of what I said initially, like I would try to understand what it is you're looking to accomplish with real estate, and that applies to if you're a buyer, an agent, a partner like a lender or attorney. What is it you're looking to accomplish? Residential, commercial? Is it something that you want, or do you want? Um, and then reach out and have conversations. Join your local associations, like your local RIA. See if that's something that you can from podcasts, other educational sites. Bigger. estate related information that you can reach out, talk to people in the industry. I'm happy to question. So, whether or not whether you want to, measure EXP versus another agency that you're looking at. I try to come as neutral as possible. I've talked people out of looking at EXP because I didn't, that if you have somebody that's in the industry and that can talk to you, understand what your needs are, and kind of counsel you. I think it's really important because I think that I know a lot more of what goes obviously into becoming a real estate agent, which is a lot more detailed than what I would have given it credit for prior to joining the industry. Because I had a call with the gentleman this morning. It was like, I make 100,000. That may or may not be true, but there's a lot of stuff that goes in. Like, I almost think that he's only looking at me like business, where he's like, I am using like the car style, etc., without necessarily understanding the blood, sweat, and tears that went into, perhaps years of making that agent who they are now. Talk to somebody, and I'm happy to be that person, kind of counsel people, what I think are the right people at the right time that help influence my career. And I'm happy to, kind of provide that insight in a pay forward type manner to somebody that's looking.
And that's perfect. So thank you so much, Jason. You've been awesome.
Rita, I appreciate you so much. You've done such amazing things. EXP, the Genesis Home, like, we're really proud of you. So nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for saying yes.
Fair enough. All right.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. I'll talk to everyone later. Thank you for tuning into the Genesis Home, and everyone have a great day.